Hi there and welcome to another Sonic Academy video with me, Phil Johnston. In this one we're going to be taking a look at 3 sets of beginner gear and trying to assess what's the sort of sweet spot in price in terms of buying a beginner setup. And we've got 3 sound cards, 3 sets of speakers and 3 controller keyboards that we're going to check out, and we're going to analyze them and figure out what ones are the best, and then at the end of it we'll be giving them away for a competition. So the first thing we need to do is just unbox these bad boys, take a look at the feature sets, and then we'll go and check them out on the main system and see how they sound. So the first one we're going to look at is the Scarlett Solo. It's £99 and let's have a look at what we get. It's a pretty solid unit. It is a metal enclosure with plastic inserts. We have standard left and right on jacks, and we have a USB-C port on it, which is interesting. We also have our mic and line inputs. Those knobs actually feel really good. We have our main volume or monitor control. We have 48 volts and air, and we have a direct monitor button and a headphone out. So pretty basic set of controls, but it feels like a nice unit. I've used Focusrite stuff in the past and their preamps are normally very good. I expect this to have a pretty decent sound, and you do get some included stuff with this. I believe there is some software, Ableton Live Lite, XLN Audio Addictive Keys, Soft Tube Time and Tone Bundle, Focusrite Red plugins, and some Focusrite plugin collection stuff as well. So this is the Behringer Euphoria UM2. This one's our cheapest one. This comes in at 30 quid, which is quite astounding really. If this sounds even half decent, it's a really good bang for your buck. Let's see what it feels like. Instantly you can feel it's very, very light. Have a plastic enclosure. It still feels like solid enough plastic. I don't think there's any major issues there. On the back we have our left and right output, which are on phonos this time. Not a fan of that personally. And we have a standard USB-A cable connector, and we have 48 volts as well, which is good. On the front we've got our mic line preamp. I think this is a dual input one, so you can actually put a TRS connection or a mic cable. Let me just check, is this a dual on this one? No, that's just a standard XLR, so you could actually record 2 instruments on that, whereas the Focusrite you can just record a mic and an instrument. We have our direct monitor button again and a headphone out. On the top we've got our mic gain, our instrument gain and our output. So yeah, pretty similar feature set to the Focusrite, and we'll see whether this can stack up sound wise. And as I say, that's like 30 quid, so very inexpensive bit of gear. Our last one is our PreSonus audio box 96. Manual. Standard USB cable. Ooh, that is hefty. This is definitely the most chunkily built, if that is a word. We've got 2 dual mic and TRS inputs on the front. We have instrument and mic volumes there, and we actually have on this one we have a mixer for our monitor. The previous 2 had switches. This one actually has a balance on it, which is actually really handy if you're recording a lot of vocals. It means you can switch between a direct signal from the microphone or your DAW playback, which I actually do a lot when I'm using when I'm recording vocals with my UAD, so I think that's a really handy feature. Also got a dedicated volume control for the headphones, which I don't think you have in any of the others, and then a main output plus 48 volts. And then on the back we have a set of standard jack cables, outputs, and our phones out. And on this one we've actually got some MIDI ports as well, so that's very, very handy. Yeah, so a good solid unit. Now what we're going to do is get these all plugged in, we'll install the drivers, and then we will check out how they all sound. Okay, so we've just done our extensive, completely unscientific tests on all 3 of these sound cards. Initial impressions when we plugged the Behringer one in, we were quite surprised at the sound of it. But as we sort of delved in deeper and we listened a bit more, you could notice it was a very pleasing sound, but it wasn't very detailed, and the stereo image wasn't that great. The Focusrite improved things a fair bit, but not as much as I was maybe expecting for the price. You definitely got a bit more stereo image and a bit more detail, but by far the one that sounded the best was the PreSonus. Just a really 3D sound to it. The detail and the transients in some of the drums we were listening to were excellent. In terms of the mic inputs, I think they were all fairly similar. We had to max the gain on both of them. The gain on the Behringer is probably a bit less than the other two, but both of these sounded very, very close. And in terms of the drivers and Ableton performance and CPU, they all exactly the same. At 128 buffer settings, they all came in at about 6 milliseconds latency. We were using ANA 2 to push the CPU, and all of them compared equally. So they were all hitting between 50 and 70 in our test benchmark. I would say this is by far the best value. The Focusrite, I'm a tiny bit disappointed, just because I have used Focusrite in the past and I always quite liked them. This is £10 dearer than the PreSonus. You don't get the MIDI. Everything feels a bit more stable on this. On the back you've got nice screwed in connectors, so they're never gonna cause you any issues. The Focusrite has what I think are surface mounted ones, so I mean maybe they're solid inside, it's hard to know, but I prefer the PreSonus quality. For 30 quid, the Behringer is a really good sound card that you could, you know, throw in a backpack and travel with, go to your friend's house and stuff like that. It certainly wasn't terrible, but it wasn't right up there. And these connectors, I'm just not a fan at all. We have to use, you know, a set of these, so that's sort of not a deal breaker, but it is an extra inconvenience. So there we go. All in all, PreSonus by far the winner. Best features, best build quality, and best sound. Focusrite next. Nice build quality, decent sound, and a good option. Behringer, if you are super on a tight budget, it's actually not bad. It'll get the job done, but you won't get the same amount of detail as you will with the other two. Okay, so next we are going to get our speakers out and we're going to try them all through the PreSonus as it was the best sounding sound card, and we'll see which one of those sounds best. Okay, so we've got our speakers unboxed. If there's such a thing as a weight test, this is slightly the lightest one. Is it? Yeah, it seems to be the lightest. Next lightest. Definitely the heaviest. Okay, let's look at the Behringer one first. So we have XLRs and jacks, a USB. So the Behringer one you can actually, I think it has a sound card built in, so you can plug directly into that and it'll work off your computer. So it'll be interesting to see how that compares. And then we've just got a trim control, and that's basically it for the Behringer. I really like the speakers on I just like the white speaker, I think that's really cool. On the back we've got trim again, XLR jack, and then we have some control room options for speaker placements. And then we have PreSonus. Again, jack XLR, and we've also got an RCA, which is handy. It would be handy if you're using the Behringer sound card because it has RCAs on it as well. We have input gain, and then we have a mid and high trim and acoustic space buttons. So a bit more options than the Yamaha and far more than this. So yeah, that's it. I think we're going to get these plugged up now and get the laptop going, and we will just test how they sound. Okay, so we tested 3 sets of speakers. One, we have the Yamaha HS5 coming in at £325. Number 2 was the PreSonus Eris E5 coming in at £220. And then we had our Behringer USB 50 coming in at around £100, about 110 actually. So the Yamaha, in our testing, these were quite bright speakers and they sounded nice and detailed, but they lacked a bit of low end. Let's check out our Eris. And we find the bass response on these out of the box to be a bit more than the Yamahas, and we think that's to do with the Eris being front ported. where the Yamahas have a rear port on them. So maybe if these are up against the wall, you might get some of that bass reflected back. Next up, we have the Behringer. Next up, we have the Behringer. They sound like 100 quid speakers, in all honesty. They're not going to set the world alight, but if you were on a tight budget, they're probably a one step up from a set of hi-fi speakers. So, final thoughts. Yamaha's probably the most detailed speakers. Sounded the nicest on the top end and mids, but really lack bass for any dance music. Might be great for acoustic and live stuff, but for dance there just wasn't enough low end. You would need a sub to really hear anything, and the sub is around 400 quid, so that puts these up into a sort of whole different price bracket of speakers. The Eris, probably the best middle ground. These are 220 quid. They sound decent enough. When you adjust some of the high frequency controls on the back, you can kind of get them sounding within the same ballpark as the Yamahas, and the low end is much better on these, so you can almost start to tune kicks, although it does start to drop off at around 50 Hertz. The Behringers, they're a bit muffled sounding. The top end's not very clear and they're not very detailed, but they're 100 quid speakers, you kind of expect that. So Sonic recommends the Eris E5s. They are 220 quid, which we think is a really nice price for the quality. And they have a decent bass response, so you should be able to get away with these for a while until you want to upgrade to a bigger set of speakers. The Yamahas come second. They are super detailed and they have a really nice top end, but the just lack of bass response just rules them out for us for any serious dance music stuff. In summary, I think all of these have quite small cones, and if you can afford it, I would step up to a 6, 7 or 8 inch cone, and that will definitely give you a bit better bass response. But the Erises definitely do the job, and you could definitely make a track on them. So that's it for speakers. Next we're going to take a look at our controllers. Okay, so we've got the Launchkey 37 working with Ableton now. It just took a quick update in Ableton, and that was only because I hadn't had my MacBook on in a few days. Once that had installed, the Launchkey booted up with session mode enabled, which meant we could trigger our pads and start and stop clips. So you can hold shift and click the 4 buttons at the top, and that'll put you into 4 different device modes. We've got device, which controls the plugins, and that'll map the parameters of the plugins across the 8 controls at the top. Got volume, which controls the volumes on each of your channels, and you can move through the channels using your track button. And then we've got pan and sends. Again, these just map to the pans and sends on each of the channels. So very good integration out of the box, worked flawlessly. And we can also go into drum mode, where we can use the pads for drums that are track armed. All in all, really easy to set up and worked really well. Really good tool for Ableton. We haven't tried it in other DAWs, so I don't expect there to be the same amount of control as it is a controller that's designed for Ableton. But keybed's really nice. The controls all feel really good, and the integration with Ableton was really good and easy to set up. Okay, so we've got the Native Instruments Complete Control A49 installed. And we had to do a few things. We had to update the firmware on it, we had to install Native Access, and then we had to install some instruments from Native Access. And I've installed a couple. I got Monarch and I've got Scarabee, and you can do a couple of cool things with this. Basically pick presets directly from the controller, which is kind of nice, but you have to use the Complete Control plugin in your DAW to be able to do that. But it does work really well. We can click on our browser, and we can just tab through different presets. Then we click the pad, and then we've got that preset to play, and it automatically maps controls. So if you're using any of the Complete bundle, it's actually really cool. If you're using third-party stuff, there is some control you can do, but it's a bit more difficult to get things set up. But all in all, I quite like the functionality, especially if you're someone who uses a lot of Complete instruments, then it would be really, really useful, and the workflow is really nice. I know on the S49 and the S61 you have the screens up here which shows you a lot more detail. It'll show your browser and everything. You do kind of miss that because you can't see what's on each of the knobs. They are capacitive touch sensitive, so you don't have to move them to tell what's on them. You just give them a quick touch and it shows them right away, and start and stop works fine in the DAW. So all in all, a decent setup, again, especially if you use Complete. Okay, so the last one we're going to take a look at is the Nectar SE49, and there's really not much to talk about here. We plugged it in, it worked, and it feels really nice. We've got pitch bend modulation, octave up and down, and transpose up and down, and we have one controller fader which you can actually assign. I have it assigned and enabled into my filter cutoff on Anna 2. And it works great. There is only one controller, so obviously that's a massive limitation, but for 65 quid, I mean, I think that's a pretty good deal. All in all, it's a decent keyboard. Doesn't quite have the same feel as the Native Instruments A49, but it is a really solid keyboard and a good entry level if you're really on a tight budget. Okay, so we think the best system is the PreSonus speakers with the PreSonus audio card, the Launch Key keyboard, and we have also chucked in a nice set of Beyerdynamic DT990 Pros. So this should get you well on your way to making some awesome music. So this is our first prize in our giveaway. For our second prize, we're going to be giving away those Yamaha speakers, the Native Instruments keyboard, and the Sapphire sound card. And for the third prize, we're going to be giving away the Behringer speakers, the Behringer sound card, and the Nectar controller. For your chance to win, just keep an eye out at the end of this video for details of how to enter the competition. Thanks very much for watching, guys. If you've enjoyed this content, let us know and drop us a comment. If you also want to get in touch, you can hit us up on our forums or on Facebook or somewhere else, or just anywhere you want, really. It just doesn't matter. Just even come around to my house and have dinner. I don't mind. Just like live with me for 6 months.